Hello everybody, welcome to our discussion of artist-run initiatives in Queensland. My name is Daniel Sala and I manage exhibitions and public programs here at Griffith University Art Museum. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land upon we are meeting, the Yagara and Turrbal peoples. I also pay my respects to the elders, past and present, and extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. And reflect that we are here on Aboriginal land, where generations have been learning, teaching and making for a millennia. We're so excited to present the first of our 4-panel discussions in conjunction with Jeff Gibson's Countertypes, the exhibition we're hearing today, curated by Griffith University Art Museum's Director Angela Goddard and Dr. Wes Hill, art historian, art critic and art curator, who is also Senior Lecturer at Southern Cross University. Today I'm very pleased to welcome Simone Hine to moderate this panel. Simone is an artist, curator and writer based in Meandrin, Brisbane. Hine has a 20-year history of exhibiting in Brisbane artist-run initiatives, including The Farm, Soapbox, Level, Box Copy and Stable. She has exhibited and curated extensively both nationally and internationally across a range of institutions, maintaining a focus on artist-run and independent spaces. Hine is founding co-director of Cupra Projects in Brisbane, a contemporary art gallery and project space since 2017 to present. She was also a founding co-director of Screen Space in Melbourne, not-for-profit screen-based gallery from 2010 to 2016, and Beam Contemporary in Melbourne, a commercial gallery from 2010 to 2014. Hine holds a PhD from the University of Melbourne, School of Culture and Communication in Arts History. She has presented research nationally and internationally. Most recently, Hine has published research in the peer-reviewed journal Film Criticism. I will now hand over to Simone to lead this discussion and introduce the panelists. Please join me in making them all welcome.
I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're going here today, the Toowoomba and Sydney people of Meandrin, and to pay my respects to elders past, present, and to acknowledge that colonialism is an ongoing process and that sovereignty is never ceded. We have 3 wonderful people on the panel that I'm very pleased to have here, and there's a lot of people here, Libby. You can't see. There's lots of people. So we're very keen to have a casual conversation, and if anybody wants to jump in and ask any questions, please feel free to do that. But I'll just start by introducing each of the panelists. Libby Harward, who's joining us from Gallimilla, Darwin today. Libby is a Ngunnawal woman whose ancestral lands and waters are in Quandamooka, in the Moreton Bay area. Her process is one of simultaneously listening, calling out, knowing and understanding country. Libby's art practice spans over 20 years, initially as a community street and graffiti artist, but more recently has been developing a conceptual art practice. Libby's recent works already engage a continual process of recalling, rehearing, remapping, recontextualizing, and decolonising cultural landscapes, utilising low and high-tech media, with elements of sound, image, installation and performance to engage directly with politically charged ideas of national and international significance. Libby's co-founded Munbata cultural space in 2021 with her husband BJ Murphy, a Jinnaburra man. Libby is predominantly interested in creating a black space in McLeish where Aboriginal people can come together to discuss and organise, collaborate, and to also showcase and celebrate on their own terms. Next to me is Amelia McLeish. She's an emerging contemporary visual and sound artist, an administrator and a researcher in Meanjin. Her work examines the visual community of Meanjin, primarily focusing on artist-run initiatives as she has an extensive archival practice which utilises ephemera collected from exhibitions and actively correlates data from related to visual arts ecology in Meanjin and to produce new works out of this paraphernalia. Amelia has exhibited throughout South-East Queensland and currently helps run Grecca's art space in Wollongabba and was also the founder of, a co-founder of Next Door ARI, and I think some other founders of Next Door are in the audience here. Georgia Hayward is a Meanjin-based artist, curator and arts worker with a cultural connection to the Murrumbidgee people in Queensland as the general manager of Outer Space, a not-for-profit contemporary arts organisation. She is passionate about the ambitious development of artistic practices across Queensland. Her artistic practice explores influence on public space, on contemporary social dynamics and community development, cultivating a collaborative approach to art making that expands community capacity and cohesion. So thank you everyone for being here and on the panel. I think we've got some really diverse perspectives on the panel, and I'm really interested in teasing out and discussing some of the great work that you've been doing in the community. So I think one of the things for me about artist-run spaces, as independent organisations, they often end up coming from people responding to something in the community, in the arts community, maybe a lack of something in the community, maybe a desire to build on something that's already there. And sometimes it's a personal response, sometimes it's a community-based response. But because of this, I feel like artist-run initiatives just have at their core this sense of a sort of a diverse, a diversity in terms of the response, the structures, the curatorial premise. And I think they're sort of loosely brought together as being actually, in a way, outside of established systems of the display of art. And, we can talk about artists they can have so many different forms, right? They can be an exhibition space, or they can be occupying online space, or they can occupy, a publishing space, or really anything where artists come together collectively and do anything. But on this panel, one thing that I think combines everyone is that each of the artisan initiatives have a physical gallery space. So I thought that I might start talking, individually with each person to some degree about the gallery spaces that you run. Just as a way of thinking about the kind of space and what that space does. So I thought I might start with you, Libby, and I apologise, I'm looking at you on the screen now, and I'm trying, so I'm aware, I'll try and look at the camera. So Minambaja it's got a physical location in Mullaney, and it's an art gallery, but it's also an art consultancy. You know, it has a shop front. It's a community, like a place to gather. It's lots of different spaces all in one. So can you talk a little bit about how each of these different aspects of your artist run initiative are interwoven into the kind of physical space, or how the physical space works in relation to that?
I'm on Larrakia country up here, so I just want to acknowledge that. And my space is Manambaja, so really close. Manambaja means welcome place, so Ja in the Dungidal language is, and also our language group crosses over. Well, it's actually in the Kabi Kabi language group, but we're on Yinabara country, so they spoke Kabi Kabi language up there. But my partner, who's Yinabara, also is connected to the Dungidal language. So Manambaja, I think both in both those language groups means welcome place. So BJ, my partner, he named it Manambaja, and it's a small Queenslander, and it's above a native plant nursery in Coral Street in Mullaney, which is in the Sunshine Coast hinterland. So it's interesting because I was thinking, firstly I was really glad to be identified in our group to talk about artist-run initiatives, because we've only been open since September and we're still formulating how we work and what we are, but I think that's really core to me, that I don't want to lose that I like that as artists, that we can push boundaries and experiment with space. And when I was thinking today about who we are and what we are, I wanted to include that. So we're positioned in this house on the in the mountains, but we also have all of that country, which is part of our place. And we also have been recently repatriated a block of land that's down in Cedarton near Woodford, and I see that as encompassing in our space as well. So in answer to your question, I'm really, like a lot of us trying to survive in the arts or trying to be artists in this colonial system, I've been really moving between spaces a lot, but my passion and heart is probably in that experimental space that is able to challenge what art is and where it sits and how we can experience it. But I am working within lots of compartments, I guess, and so we have a shop front, and BJ and I are currently working on a product range that will hopefully bridge some of the gaps that we see in our space. I guess what I'm talking about is at the heart of where my passion is. It's in that experimental space where art isn't necessarily an object, or it can't be acquired, but being in that regional area, that's really new. So we've really enjoyed having a space where people can come into the gallery. They don't actually know how to be or how to, interact, but because we're there, we're able to talk to the work and educate, but we also need to kind of be everything in that space. So we have shows that, so far we've had 3 shows and they've all been very different, and then we've got the shop front, and I'm really, it's hard for me to talk succinctly about it because I'm navigating how the more traditional works, although they're complex too, and the shop front actually work to leverage our capacity to have a practice that's more true to who we are and what we want to be as artists and cultural people.
Yeah, so it also becomes, in a sense, it becomes, when it's not object-based, it becomes integrated into life in a way, and I think that's where the relational elements of your work, I can see where, if it's not about an object and a continual exhibition program that's based on that, but it's about the conversations around that in the shop as much as in the space.
Yeah, and we want to extend into our main core of our reason is about connecting to country and enabling more capacity for that, and also caring for country. So we're asking a lot of questions always about how, as an artist space, we can do that. And it's really limitless what we can do. It's just whether or not the art world is able to see that or support it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and in terms of, you mentioned the idea of educating the community in McLeish. I'm wondering if you could maybe speak a little bit about that idea of both education but also the position of the gallery in the context of McLeish as a regional centre.
Yeah. Well, I love being, I've had a really, I've never curated before, so having the space has been amazing, and I've really enjoyed, as being a more conceptual artist, I've really enjoyed the experience of being able to curate other artists' works, and that's got a lot of responsibility to it, because I've curated my partner's new work, so BJ's new work, and I've also curated and festival and elder Uncle Noel Blair's work. So it's also a family responsibility and a responsibility to country, and like a real care in how I'm able to nurture them and their arts practice and their cultural responsibilities. But in terms of education, we're kind of stuck in this place where a lot of people will be coming to the gallery to learn about culture. And what I love about being I'm pretty strict on this as an art gallery, and we talk about art, because art has a really, as an artist I can communicate so much more, and I'm not as drained culturally at the end of the day when people are coming in to just find out about culture continually, and I can redirect it back into the art, into the material, and into the artists. So that's really rewarding for me, to use art as a tool to communicate about culture, because I find lots of non-Indigenous people are really hungry at the moment, and so we need to find ways that we can feel like we're getting back. And through positioning ourselves as artists and talking about our art and other artists, that's really good. But I guess in that sense, we had one really relational show in the middle of Uncle Noel's and BJ's show, and that was really interesting because people they're not really used to it. I think there is another gallery on a couple of other galleries on the coast that are just starting up, but mostly in that area, people are looking for commercial work. So it's been exciting talking about providing space for conversation, but positioning that as art. And there's so much I can say about that. But I guess just the other complexity that we deal with a lot is that a lot of people still expect to see Indigenous art that is based around stories that don't belong to our country. So Central Desert work or work that's been adapted from that Central Desert style. So at the top end, we're educating on a kind of a level that we really want to be at, and then at the other end, we're still trying to convince people that we're actually Aboriginal artists, because we don't have the type of work that they're expecting to see.
Yeah, and I think your work as well, it deals with political issues around Indigenous land in terms of mining, and then uses the language of road signs and things like this. So all of the, you know, the aesthetics around it, for lack of a better word, are perhaps, you know, they're dealing with these issues in a very different way, and what it means to be Indigenous spreads across a lot of different, you know, avenues. And I think, what you're talking about there, it becomes a way of, you know, opening that dialogue to a broader community in a way.
Yeah, and you know, we continually doing that, and we're just new, so I just am trying to get my head around who we are and what we do. But I definitely think being an artist or positioning myself as an artist in my life is a really powerful way, and a space that's, you know, at times really safe, because we can push some of those boundaries. Because so much of what we do in our life is about transformation and change of ideas and concepts, but being able to position it in the art world and being able to have a space that is run by us allows us a presence that kind of makes sense, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. I might shift over to you, Georgia.
Sure.
So you're sort of on, really, at this present moment at our space, in this transition from, you know, art, are you still an art, you know, an artist on initiative? And I kind of can't help but think in this context, you know, when Outer Space opened in 2016, going down a little laneway to Llewellyn and Katie's studio, and it was tiny, and it was Besser block, and it was a totally raw space to where Outer Space is now, and to where it was. How do you think that all those kind of spaces, the actual physical spaces that you're in now, how do you think that affects the way of, like, the way that the work gets made, or across those different spaces? Because over 8 years, there's been lots, and even within the space, there's a lot of different actual physical spaces.
Physical features, totally.
Yeah.
I think from, you know, a little Besserbrook studio to then Montague Road, and like that more industrial warehouse form of structure that had so much like floor space to work with, to now being in the Judith Wright Art Centre with our little cube box gallery, it's completely affected, I guess, how we engage with artists. And I think each time it's been, you know, as you said, we are in this transitionary period. Are we an ARI? Are we a small arts organisation? And for those that don't know, that's that conversation is just coming from the fact that this year we were fortunate to secure organisational funding through Arts Queensland that we're incredibly grateful for. But that's kind of started this conversation of, you know, who are we as an organisation? And I'm very passionate about kind of keeping the ruthlessness of the ARI structure within us, even if we are kind of formalising ourselves in other ways. But yeah, I think at its core, I believe that we are still who we always were, from the vision of, you know, Llewellyn and Caitlin to now, I think it's been a testament to how many hands outer space has kind of been carried through to this point that in a way our spaces have kind of matched the stepping up, I think, of the Brisbane art scene and emerging artists, because that's really what we're here for, and it's been lovely to kind of offer more in terms of professional opportunity to emerging artists. And I think, you know, being in the Judith Wright Arts Centre now is such a fabulous opportunity, and even to experience that kind of beautiful intersection of so many other different practices, like artistic practices, whether it be the dancers or the circuitry that are upstairs. Like, it's lovely to kind of have you know, peers that are artistic and exploring their own thing. So I think it's been an incredible opportunity for us to kind of see how we go each time we move to a new space, and see how outer space sticks true to who we are, but also allows ourselves to expand and you know, become engaged in what the new space is. So yeah, I think it's been a wonderful opportunity for us to kind of not lose ourselves at our core and amongst that space, but also follow that original out-of-the-box thinking where we are more than just a gallery space. I mean, that's certainly become our home and our cornerstone in terms of it's easy to communicate that to the public, I think, and to the artists, and you know, it's our flagstone program in the way that, you know, we really work to make that space have a rolling program throughout the year, and but it's also really fun to offer opportunities to artists to project onto the outside of the building, or put on vinyl on a wall, or you know, create a mini gallery in our office space. It's I think that kind of radicalness in terms of thinking about space has never left us as a group, and I'm really grateful for that too.
And I think talking about those spaces that have the street frontage, like you're taking over a you know, a shop window,
Yes.
and you're taking over the side of the building. There's quite, and you've done other off-site projects as well that involve public space. Do you think how do you see that as part of the core, like engaging with the kind of general public? Because sometimes artists on initiatives do become this niche, and like you were talking about, Libby, about how you do this stuff, how does an audience respond to that? And you kind of, and I feel like in terms of those outward spaces, there's an engagement just with people walking by in the valley. And do you think that's part of the curation of those spaces? Or?
I think most definitely. I think we're really fortunate to have so many different things happening at once that it's beautiful in the way to think about it all together and go, oh, well, how are all of these different exhibitions or shows or works speaking to each other at the same time? But I think even from like an audience perspective, it's been the most beautiful experience to kind of sit in the office and have the window gallery at the front. If you haven't seen it, it's like a glass box that kind of looks directly into the gallery space, and my desk is like hidden behind there. But it's people you'd never expect otherwise to, you know, walk into our gallery space and critically engage with something, but they just see these, you know, installations that kind of are put before them. You know, they don't go seeking it, but they always stop. And because we're like right at the front of a bus stop as well, and people will be waiting and just have the most glorious reactions of either confusion or like admiration of like, how is a kite flying in this space? It's been beautiful, and I think those spaces, as you mentioned earlier, have really come out of necessity, and I think we're so fortunate to have, you know, the gallery space and to be working with that. But I think our window gallery space was an initiative of Dr. Courtney Coombs, who was director 2 directors ago now. But you know, I started by curating that space, and they were like, this is the vision, before the platform was even made, and it was before we had the lease to the main gallery, so it was, you know, born out of that sense of necessity to support artists and to make space where they might not otherwise be. So I think those spaces are incredibly important, and you know, this year we've had such a wild opportunity to be on billboards as well throughout regional Queensland through our Super Cup program, and that's just been such a fabulous and odd experience at the same time to kind of put artists' works either from metropolitan areas or regional areas on billboards out near like the Bundy airport. And I can just imagine like what would someone's reaction who, you know, isn't connected to that is just a, you know, going about their business and to see that is kind of wonderful. And I think it is creating that space and, as like you said, that conversation around art that, you know, is the art itself as well.
Yeah. And so in terms of, you know, you were mentioning staying true to the goals. I feel like outer space has a real commitment to the idea of ARIs as supporting emerging artists. Is that sort of what you mean by, or can you maybe...
Staying true.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we, from inception, have kind of always existed to support emerging practice in Brisbane, and I think, you know, starting as an ARI, it was a matter of engaging peers for Libby and Caitlin, and really, yeah, making space for practices to stay alive in Brisbane. I think there's always this hidden discourse of people leaving and returning to Brisbane, and I think it happens on a cycle every time, and I think the ARI's structure at large, all of them that exist, have been such a testament to making art happen in Brisbane, and I think it's been in really wonderfully experimental ways, and it doesn't need to be in a quote-unquote gallery space to make it of value and of importance. And if anything, I think the diversity of ARIs across Brisbane on the engine's history has been the success of, you know, Brisbane's art scene. Yeah, so I think in sticking true to who we are, for me, that's just putting the importance on emerging practices and making sure that, you know, we're really fortunate with funding and the years of experience behind it all, to be offering that kind of professional development edge to, I guess, the ARI scene. It's, yeah, experimental, but also being able to provide a little bit more of a platform, whether that's, you know, being able to pay an artist fee or being able to say, you know, this is your space to create it. And so I think that's been a lovely way to kind of evolve the vision, but really staying true to offering that space and time to emerging practices.
Yeah. And Amelia, you're currently at Reckers.
Yes.
And Reckers is almost the opposite, right? It's been, it's centred around the space.
Yes.
And there have been previous directors and what have you, and you've kind of taken on that, but the space is really central to
Yes.
Reckers. And even the name has the,
Yeah.
you know, the previous use of the space in
Yes.
there. So could you maybe talk a little bit around that?
So if no one's been there, Reckers is situated in the front of an old bike Reckers that was abandoned. And Sarah Polgrain, I'm just blank everyone's name now, but everyone that started it, it's pressure, come on. Everyone that started it approached this landlord and said, can we use this abandoned space? And they were like, sure. And so they built a gallery at the front. And as a pure way for people to come in and experiment and do something new with their practice if they wanted to. But think about the space. Think about how their work might be situated in a space like this with like a cracked window and like steel bars. But also, it's got white walls, so if someone did come in and just want to put their own art in and try new work, that's totally fine. That's totally okay. But we do think about how the space will be beneficial to whoever proposes work to us. Sorry if I went a little bit off track there.
No, that's fine.
But I started running Reckers in April 2020 after having a show next door. I approached Sarah and was like, hey, I really just want to help out. And then Sarah did a call out and I applied for that. And ever since then, we just really championed the idea of experimental art practices, having a place for artists that might be at a crossroads in their practice to try something new, try something different, but also for emerging artists that maybe haven't had a show before, and which I consider still experimental artists, because their practice might not be as refined as we might expect of someone. And so giving them space to have a show and think about their work in the context of records, but also where it's situated within the ecology of music and visual arts.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I know you've mentioned before about the idea of artist-run spaces not just being for emerging artists,
Yes.
but part of a broader ecology.
Yeah.
And not necessarily the lowest rung on a sort of hierarchy of.
Yeah.
Do you see that as part of the way that you run the space, or how?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Because I think a lot of people view ARIs as a stepping stone, as a way for emerging artists and emerging arts workers to get their foot in the door and do something. And I think what they're forgetting is that sometimes work doesn't work in commercial sectors, it doesn't work in institutional sectors, and that's where the ARIs come in and they can really flourish by providing artists an opportunity to test out new works. It can be used as a stepping stone, absolutely. ARIs can be whatever people want them to be. But this is my philosophy in that I've pressed onto current records program is this idea of you are an artist and you're valuable as much as anyone. It doesn't matter if you don't sell $10,000 paintings or you're not at some institution, has white gloves hanging your work up. Your work is valuable, and I think it's really important to have those spaces for people to go, well, I just want to get messy. And I think the really great thing about records is most of the people that come are artists.
Yeah.
So they understand. We don't need to talk down to people to go, well, this is what conceptual art is, and we don't have to start at the foundation. We can just immediately talk to them on their own level because they're artists as well. And so when it comes to experimentation, there's less anxiety about experimenting and having a go and trying out something new, because everyone that's going to see it is basically going to be other artists that know exactly what you're doing and know the context. Yeah, did that answer the question?
Yeah, it did.
I'm going to ask that every time. I tend to ramble.
And I guess it's a broader question for everyone in terms of, and I guess it's an idea, it kind of points to the idea that I open with, that these spaces are quite idiosyncratic. And I think that one of the things that in some ways artists run initiatives, the name of that does, all it really is saying that this is something initiated by an artist, and it comes from a perspective of an artist. So in some ways, this idea that the spaces can be anything that you want them to be, as a kind of necessary part of that is that they often sit in these spaces outside of institutions because that's where they have sort of relevance, but it's also the kind of driving reason for having them in the first place. And I think in some ways each person here has talked about that in kind of different ways. And I'm interested in a sense, and this is really to anyone on the panel, if you feel like being an artist has actually influences the sort of the logic or informs the way that the space operates.
I'd say absolutely. Yeah. I feel like if I didn't have my own art practice with my own conceptual ideas and my own need to experiment and create dumb works that need to be figured out and reflected upon, that I probably wouldn't approach ARIs the same way that I do. So I feel like an arts worker might come into an ARI and think, like it needs to have like a proper program, it needs to have it be polished and nice, whereas Wreckers is kind of grungy, kind of, you know, not polished. And I feel like that's my being an artist coming through that aspect as well, as me responding to the space as an artist, running this artist run initiative at the same time.
I also feel in Wreckers, there's almost artwork in just the white walls, cutting into like the smashed window. That's been there since it started.
The stickers.
And again, the stickers on the outside and the reference to that, like this whole meta kind of discourse around that. Libby, do you feel like your role as like being an artist, influences that? It's an extension of your practice?
Yeah, I absolutely want it to be. I think for most of the time it is. It's so awesome sitting here and listening to Georgia and Amelia, because especially saying the power or the value of the institution, because saying that ARIs or other spaces, they're not less than, they have like a really powerful purpose. It is really important that this is just an extension of my arts practice. Sometimes it's hard because it's sort of like, we just call it the colony, but it's like similar, kind of getting swept up into these systems, which are useful at times, but kind of eat us up. And just sitting here and going, we have to be really strong at producing spaces for people to experiment and that sit outside, but also push that they're seen and valued. And I feel like I do that inside. It keeps going inside it itself in that space, because I'm also a lot, because we have such a colonial history of our objects being hung in museums and galleries. I feel like when we can move outside of that space, if we can just shift the gaze more often outside it to the perimeters, we will be able to make more authentic work. But as also you're always kind of moving between those two spaces, but I do feel that the other kind of institutional spaces and works that fit off country and can move internationally, that aren't speaking directly to place, do get a lot more power. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think also, in some ways, anything that is an object can be, it easily becomes a commodity as well. And I think artists on initiatives that really have a strong history in terms of performance art, and installation, and a sort of ephemeral quality to the work as well, which really it's a sort of it sits in the face maybe of more not just commercial, but any object-based collecting institutions or anything. And not to say they don't have a purpose, but I think the ephemeral, the nature of ARIs in terms of the way that they operate.
Can I just add one quick thing in that, which I feel, it's just my opinion, that I've noticed that through starting to study last year at Griffith, I feel like as Aboriginal artists, we actually don't have as much access to that space currently. That a lot, and even up here at Darwin Art Fair and going to the Cairns Art Fair as well, it's amazing. Like it's all amazing, but that experimental practice we don't get as much access to. And I know that Warraba and Dom are also working in that space to provide more space for us. But I do think that sometimes we get that that gets pushed into a space of, you know, sociology or anthropology or ethnography, and so we need to kind of create more or have more access to these experimental spaces and support and that, because there's not many avenues, or there's not that there's not many avenues, but the systems that hold our work fantastic, but they're not in that experimental space as much.
And I guess the experimental space is about something you were talking about, which is that it can really be anything. And it's this opening up to, well, actually this artwork can be anything, or this gallery can be anything, or this community can be, you know, anything, and it can change. And so I think another thing that maybe this leads on to is this idea of longevity in terms of artist-run initiatives, because I feel like this ephemeralness of the gallery, you know, they come and they go as well, and I think, you know, there's good and bad things to that. Is that something that, I mean, this is to any of the panellists, that you think about in terms of, do you see the importance of, you know, keeping the gallery going, or you know, do you think about just what's happening at the moment?
I think it's definitely always on the timeline, and you're always thinking about it for how long should it exist and can it exist. And unfortunately, a lot of that is to do with financing. Like, how do you fund a space, and how do you know, keep the door open in terms of, you know, we rely massively on volunteer support, and thanks to my volunteers that are here today. But you know, even still, we're so fortunate to have, you know, a space we know we go to and an office that we know we operate out of. But even still, there's those factors that do rely on time and generosity of other people to come on board, and also really believe in what Outer Space / any other arts org, because I know most ARIs run a volunteer support, if not the people themselves running it, a volunteer base. So I think, you know, our programming is based off like a gallery lease, and you know, we're fortunate that we have good roots in the sense that I'm really confident that if Outer Space, you know, wasn't able to exist in the gallery that we're currently in, you know, in 3 years' time, that we would adapt and find something new. I think that's just ingrained in who we are, and I think it's a testament to how often we've been able to kind of change space and still come back and still deliver what we see is important to the community. So, but yeah, I think that there's always that little thing in the back of your head where you're like, what's going to happen if X, Y, Z, you know, doesn't fall into place? Like COVID has been a massive indicator of how do you know, adapt to the online, or how do you adapt to put art in public spaces that can be visible through a window or through social distancing. So yeah, I think the timeline is kind of the beautiful but also really challenging part about ARIs, is when do you say, yes, this existed beautifully for the time that it served, and then when do we actually fight to really push on it and, you know, keep this here?
How about you, Amelia?
See, I really love what you've said, Georgia. I really agree. I think I'm not so much concerned about ARIs lasting forever. I think it's actually sometimes a benefit that new ARIs start, and new ARIs come and bring up a whole bunch of new people with new practices into the fold, rather than it's the same old like circle giving each other exhibitions over and over and over and over and over. But I think projects like ARI Remix and people, I think projects like ARI Remix are like a really great foundational resource that documents all artist-run activity. Currently focusing on Queensland that has everything from everywhere. He's a magician. and maintaining like a strong archive of the things that have happened is really, really important, because your RE won't last forever. Spoiler alert. It will end at one point, one or another, unless it becomes like an IMA institution or a Metro Arts where it's like too funded to fail. It's like a big bank in America. Like I can never see them not existing.
Yeah.
I hope. I think like maintaining your own personal archives, I'm talking to you personally about what your space does, and any show you go to, take documentation, take the leaflets, put them in a folder, because one point or along, I'll come along, or someone like me will come along, and I'll be like, tell me all about like Emergence Collective or NRE, or just show me everything about what you have done in your time, even though it only lasted 2 years. I think that longevity I really love.
Yeah.
But I think that REs, if you are starting to hurt yourself and not being comfortable mentally running the space, please, we love you, please just like, it might be time to like be on a hiatus. Because I feel like you are like really important to the scene, and if you burn yourself out, you might burn yourself too much and not want to come back.
Yes.
And so burn yourself just enough that you can please come back.
That actually reminded me of the work that you do at Outer Space recently, where it was on the billboard, and really it crossed over into whether it was an artwork or whether it was just information about where REs are.
But also where institutions and commercial galleries are.
Yes. So just in terms of the archiving, and it was almost just at that moment, this is where the space is. How about you, Libby? What about how about you in terms of the kind of longevity? Because I think for Amelia and Georgia, you've taken over spaces where this is, but for you, do you feel that that's something important, like as a founding?
Well, I've been through a big process just probably in the last 24 hours, and this actual space that we've created here has been really helpful for me, because I feel like this is actually an extension of my artistic intention. And so I probably still will, we're looking at formulating a not-for-profit, we're looking at how arts practice crosses over into eco-farming and all this kind of stuff, but just having this conversation and listening to amazing people has just freed a lot of my stress up around that, because it doesn't actually matter if it exists or how long it exists for. And the fact that it becomes part of an ongoing ecology and makes difference and change. If you'd have asked me that before this conversation, I probably wouldn't have known, but it's been really useful. It's just about continuing to be able to do my arts practice, which is providing experiences and space. And my biggest thing at the moment is about relationship and relational practice. So the interrelationship between all our spaces is really important, and how we document that, like you said. So thanks, it was really good.
I guess that's a good time to open the questions, any questions that people might have. Paul.
Thank you, everyone. This is awesome to be talking about artist-run communities, having been involved for forever. Libby, I wanted to just jump in here because I just love what you were saying about change.
Can you hear Libby?
Can you
Yeah.
hear? Hi, Libby. Hi, Libby. It's Paul.
Or-
Hi. I actually wanted to ask you about your native plant nursery.
Yeah. So we're above the native plant nursery, and that is run by Karen and Spencer Shaw, and they're also they do bush regen. So that that's a really strong relationship, and will continue to influence the work that we do. And we've also been influencing Karen in her connection with her ancestral country as well. But yeah, that story is unfolding more and more. But what else did you want to know about it?
Well, I mean, decolonising is a really important element of your practice, and I wonder whether the regen and the providing access to native plants and caring for country, that's a really important element to what you're doing. I wonder whether that ecological, environmental emphasis, even though it's small, and as you say, you're just beginning, it's really important to sort of emerging the local conditions when an artist-run community is emerging, and what the shape and the space is and what the feeling is. But the native plant nursery to me is a really great example of how varied and variable artist-run communities are. And I wonder whether for you it's a really strong emphasis on decolonising within the broader repertoire of your practice.
Well, I mean, we didn't purposely position ourselves there, but that relationship has just been based on our mutual care. But yeah, definitely, and also it extends to eco-farming, and it also extends to fire farming. I think we've got a lot of ideas, and they have to have a very long-term vision, because there's a lot of things that prevent us from doing what we want to do. But there's a really strong partnership between Karen and Spencer with their knowledge of plants, and then BJ, my partner, who has a strong connection to Yinnaburra country. And then there's a lot of more who also have connection with Yinnaburra country, including my family, because that's where we went to the Banya gatherings. So we did have a Banya exhibition, because we couldn't not, during the Banya season, and that was incredible. And just the way that we could interconnect with the nursery, and then also talk about food sovereignty through our partnership with the Eco Farm. And we were really lucky to have my cousin Kieran Anderson, the Quandamooka chef, living on Yinnaburra country at the moment too. So I really want to revisit that, whether it's through the Banya again or whether it's through another plant. We're also talking about how that relates seasonally. So can the gallery actually be part of creating, not creating because it's already created, but developing a way to communicate about our seasonal practices and repatriate that knowledge. So there's heaps, it's really rich place up there, lots of really amazing people trying to do good things for country.
Thanks, Libby.
Thanks.
Do we have any other questions? Yeah.
I just wanted to well, first of all, thank you all so much for the panel. I just wanted to ask about in terms of how do you manage with the promotion, I guess, and also in terms of without the volunteering that you guys have around, in terms of having the spaces, having the physical spaces, how do y'all go with kickstarting promotion and financing like that without kind of losing the original idea and concept of what the physical space is meant to represent?
Records isn't funded. We run entirely off of the bar.
Okay.
So anytime anyone donates a button, it kind of hurts. But we run entirely off of the sweat of volunteers. If we got funding, we would pay artists, but we can't because we don't even have an ABM. We just run under this old records, basically.
We're quite different. So we have volunteers that assist with the invigilation of the gallery and other projects here and there, but staff-wise, although there is currently one staff member, I do
Yeah.
It's her job. It's all kind of consolidated at the moment. But I think promotions-wise, it's kind of integral to making yourselves known, not even necessarily to anyone outside of the arts community, but the people you want to engage with. And I think, Instagram is where it's at art community-wise in terms of like free resource, pretty like you don't need to be a wizard on marketing strategy or anything like that. To be able to put up some content quickly, let people know when an event's happening. So I think that's if you are starting something, that's probably where I'd start. Is just make that Instagram account and go from there, because I think that's something that you can then share with whoever you're working on the project with, or expanding. And then of course, if you want more people to know about it, or you have specific call-outs and stuff coming, I think that's where, as we said before, the relationship between ARIs is so important and so vital. Like, seeing stuff come up at Records from like an outer space hat on, absolutely we want to share that. Absolutely we want the community to know about it, because at the same time, I'll see these people at an outer space opening, and then we'll pop over to Records and see the same people. Like, that's what the core of it is. Like, outside of the ARIs, the facilitation vessel, that's what the community is about. So yeah, I'd say between get an Instagram and then get to know who your fellow ARIs are, that's probably the core of getting people to know about it.
Sorry, thank you.
Kimberly.
Yes. I just had a question. Before you were sort of talking about how ARIs, one of the awesome things about them is that they can sort of become anything, and the art they show, it can be all sorts of art. And as someone that works in an ARI as well, I guess at times that is sometimes the challenging part, is we are artists ourselves, sort of with this self-responsibility now to share other people's art. And sometimes that can be, as artists, we don't always have the skills to be making those decisions, especially like an ARI is usually just a group of people that's come together and just starting off to doing something. So there's not usually like years of been working together. It's like ARIs might not even last that long to have time to build up those experiences. And I guess we've sort of just learned as we've gone along. But I guess that does leave open the space for people to make mistakes, or, I don't really know where the question is in this, but maybe it's just like, how have you guys dealt with that, sort of being an artist? Is it your own arts practice that then gives you the knowledge and skills, or is it finding professional help outside of running the ARI? Like mentors, how have you guys dealt with that, or experienced it? Maybe that's a question, I don't know. Or just your thoughts about it in general.
I feel like there's multiple things in there. I think for me, my practice is something that's definitely become secondary to outer space. And that's been something I don't know, at times it feels like a guilty relationship of being like, but I want to, connect with this thing. But I think the more I've come to be familiar with my practice, it's the opposite. Like, outer space is an extension of that, and a practice of, community cultivation and an understanding of public space and using public space where viable to make art happen for other people. So that's kind of an ongoing relationship, and then every so often I'll be like, I'm gonna practice. Like, I'm really gonna get back there. But it's kind of beautiful at the work we do in ARI land. In terms of like where the skill set comes from, I do think that quite a lot of it does come from being an artist and having that foundational perspective. I think it's hard as an artist to kind of quantify in a business world what your value and skill set is, and I feel like artists are not great because of the way society frames the art world, and actually articulating, higher order thinking, interpersonal relationships, like all of that are the skills of like a management side of things. And like background on myself, I have a bachelor's in management as well as my degree in visual arts, and I think going through university and studying that, I got so many odd looks about what is the connection between these two, and a lot of expectation that business was my fallback rather than diversifying my skill set. And I think in a way being an artist has taught me more about management and how do you work with people and how do you have a greater understanding of the industry you're working with, but also the larger community and society. So I think don't negate your experience as an artist and what that brings to the table. And I think a little plug here, I'm currently myself a part of the creative business partnerships or something run through Razen. So they're offering free mentorship at the moment, and I'm working with Jinawari, who is such an incredible person from far north Queensland, and at the moment we're just doing mentorship stuff about her experience of being a First Nations woman and running, organising, being an artist, but also facilitating other people's practices. So that's currently on at the moment. If you want more information about it, just flick me an email. You can find it on the Outerspace website, or come chat to me afterwards, because that's a free service that's running through Razen, where you get partnered with these incredible people in the arts industry that have had a wealth of experience. So I would encourage anyone that's interested in kind of building skills or knowledge where you might not feel like you have it, but just having those connections and conversations. So that's a good way to do it as well.
Yes, just something to add to that. There is free.
Just something to add to that. There's free mentoring at, I think, with Brisbane Business Hub. Yeah. So that's in the city, and I think there's a place in Nunda, Nudgee, or somewhere there.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts or questions?
I've got one more.
Yeah.
I promise I could ask lots of questions. Simone, I'd actually like to direct this one to you, because we were just talking yesterday about, we talk about artist-run communities responding to a gap or a lack or, something, that's not working for artists. And so artists sort of self-organise as groups, as artist groupings, to respond to something. And we were talking to Simone about, one of the iterative elements to artist-run communities, for example, Screen Space in Melbourne, and then sort of jump cut to your involvement here in Brisbane with partner projects. And we're talking about what the conditions were for you when Screen Space emerged. So I wouldn't mind just asking you about reflecting on that, but also to the panel more broadly. We talk about experimental practices, and I'm just really interested from each of you guys who are just so awesome to speak about what the local conditions might be that you're responding to in starting something, and how you might convey that to others who can feel empowered that they too can start something if they feel there's a gap or a lack or something missing that they can address.
Yeah, sure. So I think, we were talking about Screen Space in terms of, I had a pretty specific thing that I was responding to there, Carl and I, where the conditions at the time in Melbourne, and I didn't necessarily think they were by the time we finished. But there were a few degrees at the university, like RMIT had a new media degree and things like that. And video art was like there was an idea of it being a single channel thing. And when I had moved to Melbourne from Brisbane, I had thought that in Brisbane there was a much more open idea of video installation as being in spaces. Whereas in Melbourne, like King's ARI, Trocadero, the original bus space, they all had these screening rooms and they were painted black and they had one video fixed in and you just went in and put your DVD into the DVD player and you played it a while ago. And, but it was very fixed and there was, and so we wanted to, there was that, and then the other thing was that I always found myself fighting against the space. So 90% of my time would be building a wall over a window or something like that. And so I had these two ideas, and so we made the space to be friendly to video art in terms of there were no windows in it. We built a cavity in the space so you could get behind the walls, and the runner boards came off so you could put cables through. And then we painted the space white, and the idea was that it wasn't a black space, like a screening room space, where the infrastructure disappeared, but it was a white gallery space that, our idea was that it was conducive to video art, but it also, but it looked like a gallery, and therefore it encouraged installation and thinking about the space in terms of the objects in the space and what have you. Sorry, that was pretty long. So I think in that sense, the conditions of that space, and I think it had the space had changed over, like sitting the wagons, where some of the spaces actually disappeared in that time with their black wall and the video, like projector like that. So yeah, I think it was very much fixed on that kind of space and that idea and creating, a kind of infrastructure that supported, showing that. What was the second half of your question?
I just because I look from where I am in midlife, I just see, as I get older, I see lots of iterativity with artist-run spaces, and so that's what my research is around. And so the example for you, Simone, so sort of jump cut from screen space in Melbourne to Piper Projects, and how that previous experience and the voices articulated in that space, screen space, how they've helped inform another iteration, if you like, that with you and Kyle. But however, what local conditions were you responding to when you relocated to Brisbane?
So I mean, I was also just reeling from having run that space. It was massive and it was a continual program, and I knew I didn't want to do that. And so it was always based on an idea of a sort of project-based, and it's a very small space. But also, I think I was also talking to you yesterday about this idea of the space responding to just the conditions of Brisbane are very different in terms of the people visiting the gallery, and so it's a lot more event-based here as well. We started having the space open every day for 5 days a week, and no one came because people don't have gallery days here because they're not open. I've sat out of space and there's not many people come through. Well, there is, but it's not the do, and I think it's, and I think it should, in a sense, maybe with Kuiper, we wanted this idea that it was, it didn't have to fit into this idea of continual programs, and that the programs could be whatever they wanted to be, but it also, I think it responded to the conditions of actually how people view Brisbane, and we just really change it up each time by not having much of a structure, I think. Yeah. I'm not sure how well I answered that. But,
Yeah, it's like, Libby, just when you were talking about feeling a sense of relief that, you may not have to be around for 10 years running Muncher Bar, for example, that you could do other things. I just, as I said, because I have had these experiences too, and I know that ephemerality of artist runs helps also inform an iterative process as well, and that's what interests me now, as a 57-year-old artist, queer artist. I think that's, but I'm really interested in what, younger artists are responding to in terms of local conditions with starting something, and how you might help inform others who are thinking, oh, there's a gap here, let's do something, let's get together and start something, because this is not okay. Yeah.
Oh, you're on mute.
we lost.
Was it a question? I was just really also felt inspired when Simone said about the no structure, because we also don't get, we had 300 and something people turn up to our opening and then nobody comes, and then they've been a bit less than that, but everyone comes to the openings. But Paul, I got most of what you said, but was it a question?
Oh, it's more of an observation. I'm just interested, I was saying to Simone that the phenomena of ARIs to me is what microphone. The phenomenon of ARIs, I guess the question for me philosophically is, why are they persistent and ongoing? Why do they keep emerging, and why do they, yes, they're ephemeral largely, but why are they persistent and ongoing? So that's a broader, key question for me, and I don't know the answer. I'm just interested.
Well, I think that it's, because they're run by artists, and we need to actually keep, I don't even think, obviously we will make space for them, but even if there wasn't space, they'd push themselves back through. And I feel really inspired, like I said before, because this conversation is speaking to me as an artist, and I've been really dissatisfied in trying to work out how I am going to get some funding, and looking at organisational structures, comparing myself to other organisations, and feeling like I just said to Bijay this morning, I just don't fit in this space. But then hearing this conversation and realising that these structures are just part of our practice, and that fits with me, and hearing you, Simone, say, well, we try not to be too structured, we can change all the time. I think that's I don't know if I'm sure I'll survive. I've survived to now, but that's what inspires me. It's just another form of activism, really.
I think though as well, that attitude of we can do anything is really inconducive to funding as well, or contemporary funding, which is problematic, to organisation. And I'm sure, Georgie, you're quite aware of the responsibilities that come with 4-year funding.
Absolutely.
And they actually direct organisations in particular ways, and they actually said that you have to meet the goals of the 4-year funding, which are not necessarily conducive. And I know when they first brought that out, I was running Screen Space, and we sat down and we looked at it, and we went, actually, building our organisation is not something we're interested You know, because a big thing for us was showing really established artists and emerging artists, and actually that is just a model that's inconducive with that funding, because the idea is you show emerging artists and then with more and more funding you start showing more established artists, but that's actually not what we were doing, and we just made the decision we couldn't apply for that because we wanted to have this agility, and then the space, you know, it's not as financially, you know, you make your decision, I think, on why you're doing it and what you want to respond to as well, I think. And I think it's personal. Yeah.
You feel that you're weaving it through your own practice, so it's actually exists because of your practice and the different things that you do and how you make it a thing, and then also the relationships with the other people that you collaborate that makes it a thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it's always based on your own terms in that sense. Yeah, and that becomes problematic in terms of fitting that into someone else's structure. In some ways, in terms of fund, like in terms of grant funding.
Yes.
But that's why it's enjoyable.
Yes.
And worthwhile. So, do we have any other questions? Did anyone else on the panel have anything else burning they wanted to say?
Can I say my quote?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Sorry. you should have given me the quote so I could ask the question.
So this is a quote from Talia Smith, and I put this in my master's when I wrote it, which was about ARIs, by the way. And it really resonated with me about like the core idea of what a ARI is important for. So by Talia Smith. We do what we do because we want the art world to be better, to be accountable, to be responsible, to be there for those who never thought it was something viable, to represent the communities that put their passion and support into it. I thought that was really, really nice and made me feel, as someone who runs an ARI, like, oh yeah, I'm doing that. We're helping the art world become a viable thing for artists, and like letting them know that they can do this thing. And they might still have to work a 9 to 5, but they can also have this space to have their own voice and put that out into the world. And that's why we do what we do, and why you should do what you do to start an ARI as well.
Do it.
Or collective, and just help the scene build and build and build, because when we build together.
Absolutely.
We don't build like separate competing entities, we build each other up. And I think that's a really beautiful thing that we should all. That was a really nice quote that I liked.
Excellent. That might be a nice place. Oh no, we've got another question.
As a basic blueprint, how do you start an ARI?
Oh, find another friend,
Yes.
plus one or plus a many other, and go, we're going to do an art-based event somewhere.
And I think particularly what Paul was saying before, finding what it is you're responding to, like what is it, I think that ties into the question of if you want it to have a little bit of legs, not like gonna last forever, but finding what it is that is driving you will help to kind of, I don't know, pull you back together if things are getting tough and it is something you want to fight for, or whether it is just a one-off, hey, we want to do this thing, let's make it happen. I think absolutely having those conversations early with your peers or your friends or whoever you're starting that with, because I think, and that can be as simple as going up to someone and opening as daunting as it might feel, and just like having that conversation, because I think there are so many individuals in the community that would want to put their efforts towards starting something or creating something, but not knowing who those other lights in the dark are that want to do the same thing. So
They will find you.
they'll find you. Like I think if you're, and especially if you like talk to the right people. Like if someone came to Amelia or I and were like, "Yeah, I want to start an ARI," we'd certainly be like, "Amelia, do you know anyone that wants to start an ARI?" Like,
I'd be like, I do.
yeah. And I think that's a great way. And I know Amelia and I were having a conversation a couple of weeks ago about how important those under the house ARIs are, and how important those little interjections of, I don't know, defiance against gentrification amongst many other things, as Libby said, the colony at large. I think those spaces are going to become more important than ever with, the Olympics coming here.
Absolutely.
In a few years' time. Space will become even more commodified and
Difficult to get.
divided, more than it is now. And I know that's extremely challenging at the moment. So, yeah, the more that you can do to kind of find those people and start those little interjections, it doesn't have to be anything massive, but just little moments of, coming together in community will be super important.
Yeah, I think you don't have to go an ARI, there's a thing that does exhibitions, or it does a thing. It could be a reading group. You could go, I know two friends that like reading the same kind of theory that I do, so let's get them together and we'll find other people that like the same thing, and we'll start a reading circle, and then every now and then you might have a critique, or you might have you might go, okay, now we're ready to put on a show together. Easy as that, but it could be anything. It could be just hanging out, listening to sound art at a barbecue at a local park with a bunch of friends, but you're the one who's going, let's do this and invite everyone we know. That's, ARIs don't have to be a structured thing with exhibitions or any programming. It's just you collectively with other artists or friends doing an art event. But it could be whatever you want it to be. You could be thinking of something that I can't even conceive of. And I applaud you for that when that happens. but like you have XYZ that was like a roaming ARI, that was like the first roaming ARI that I heard of. They just went around and did whatever. I think the model of having a space and having an exhibition program, that's one way to run an ARI, but it's not the way to run an ARI. An ARI can be whatever you want it to be, as long as you're recording an art thing, or doing an art thing.
If I might just add on that as well, we started an ARI at the start of 2020 as COVID happened, so we didn't even get the chance to be a regular functioning ARI at any point. And I think that's also a nice thing as well, to just be open-minded to what it could become, because we started this year doing an online residency program where artists get to create an online artwork that exists as a website. And we back at the start were not like, let's make artworks out of websites. Like that's what we're passionate about, internet and stuff. Then again, that is a personal interest of mine. But side note being that we just started brainstorming new ways to function, and our passion was emerging artists and artists that might be coming straight out of uni or even high school that haven't done anything before. And so it was really like just making it accessible, and that was something we were able to jump into. Just like thinking outside of the box, like that it could be anything is really true. Like it can be whatever you want it to be, which is exciting and terrifying. But
One more question.
I'd just like to share, I think we're coming from different trajectories, and I'm really happy that to be surrounded by really amazing, doing pioneering works in the community, and sometimes it takes one person, two persons to really create that spark. So I'd like to share somehow maybe an experience that I'm coming from the Philippines. This is my 3rd month in Brisbane, so I'm really looking for this kind of conversation. And I'm also a community artist and doing initiatives in the community. So what we did during the pandemic, we created like a art barter with friends. So because we cannot connect physically, we connected through Zoom. So we bartered our art together, like poetry and to film and music. And so we kind of like had that connection. And then one of the projects I'm doing, not necessarily just specifically connected with a space, we have to create that space anywhere because it's anyway now because of the pandemic we don't have to be in one space. So one of the things that I created is the co-love. We kind of like zoom in to each other. So coming artists from different parts of the world, we kind of zoom in. And one of the projects that I'm doing is based in a prison with women. So we're kind of creating this space now, democratizing that art making can be in the prison. Art making can be anywhere else. And so it was really interesting because like zooming in from Barcelona, from Germany, from Alaska, from Korea, and from a village in Indonesia, and we're like doing this work together and painting together, dancing together. So I'm still doing that collab right now, and I would love to invite whoever wants to collab with us. Love. I'm Rosa, by the way. Thank you. So, but one thing I'd like to share, just a thought as well for Amelia. I'd really like to talk to you, never had a chance to talk. It's actually one of the questions that I asked in one of the conferences, and I asked one of the elders from a Karen tribe in Thailand, what is your concept of art in your village? And he just answered like mind-blowing for me. He said, oh, basic, does art matter to you? For an Indonesian guy, he said, no, it doesn't matter to us. Because it's their lifestyle, the way of life in the village. They create terracotta, they embroider, it's just part of their own lifestyle, as part of their living art, So the other Karen tribe was saying, art, the basic concept of art is agriculture. Because when you can manage your land, you can plant your food, then that makes you more viable as a human beings, right? And the highest would that be water management. The kind of very basic thinking that for me was very high thinking, which is really thinking about sustainability, where they were way ahead of us, thinking about climate crisis. They're thinking of that as a way of living, as a conscious, mindful way of living. So I think this kind of conversation is really interesting, and I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that might be time.
Yeah.
Yes. Thanks everyone for coming and
Thank you very much, Simone, and thank you all to our speakers, Libby, Georgia, and Amelia. That was really interesting and so great to see how these art response spaces can be very liberating and opening, and it's really up to you what you want to make of the situation. Please join me in thanking our speakers today. Thank you also everyone for attending and for giving your voices to the conversation. Before you head off, can I let you know about our next event, which will be on Saturday the 13th, next weekend, and it's titled Art Publishing in Australia, where Wes Hill and fellow panellists Sarah Foldent, Alison Kubler and Marilena Hewitt will be discussing what are the current trends in editing, publishing and art criticism, and what are the possibilities for new forms of cultural distribution. Next Saturday, yeah, same time. Yes. And no Zooms, good. Thank you for zooming in.
Thank you.
Panelists will discuss the current state of art publishing in Australia and internationally with their local and national publishers. So, thank you again, and see you then.